have you ever been in love? Have you ever had your heart broken? Have you, struggled with your concept of God and a divine being? Have you thought about your mortality, your purpose in life? Have you been beaten down by a failure? Then you know what you need to know. And people around us are all having different experiences, and sometimes they're having tremendous joys and sometimes they're having tremendous struggles, and we need to have grace with each other and with ourselves, and I think art is part of that.
Welcome back to another episode of Stories That Move. I'm Mason Geiger, and as always, I'm here with my co-host, Matt Deuel. Today, we're diving into a conversation about art, culture, and how creativity plays a role in shaping a community.
Our guest today is Sea Grandon, a contemporary art advisor, attorney, and the director of Atelier, an art gallery right here in Warsaw. Sea has an incredible background in fine art, market trends, and transactions, and she's helping to foster creativity and appreciation for the arts in our community.
And for today's interview, Matt is going to be joined by a very special co-host, his wife, Erica. Erica and Sea have connected through their shared experience of running businesses downtown and their mutual passion for art and creativity. So it's only fitting that she joins the conversation.
It's going to be a great discussion about the impact of art in smaller communities, the challenges and opportunities in making art more accessible, and what the future of creativity in Warsaw could look like. Whether you're an artist, a creative, or just someone who appreciates the role of art in shaping culture, this episode is for you. So let's get started. Please welcome Sea Grandon to Stories That Move. Hey friends, welcome back to Stories That Move. I'm your host, Matt Deuel, and with me today, special co-host, my wife, Erica. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
to be here.
Really appreciate it. Mason is on the road traveling, supporting our clients, and I appreciate you filling in. And here we are in our brand new beautiful set that the team has designed for us. So really excited about that and very excited about our guest, Sea Grandon. Sea, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have dual duels today. Quite a treat.
I love it. Well, so good to have you. And I have been looking forward to this conversation for months. We had a moment where we had to reschedule, and I'm so appreciate your graciousness in doing that. And
no, I'm happy to be here. I'm very excited.
Awesome. So Sea is a contemporary art advisor and attorney, which is just those two things alone. That's a very cool mix. Owner and director of Atelier, which is a contemporary art gallery here in Warsaw, Indiana. And I'll say the only contemporary art gallery between Indianapolis and Chicago.
That's right.
Amazing.
That's right. Yeah.
So cool. Well, again, thanks for being here. Why don't you just take a moment, introduce yourself to our audience, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So yes, I'm Sea Grandon. I opened Atelier in March of 23, so it's been opened about 2 years now. I moved to Warsaw 12 years ago. And I have a family of 4 kids, and I love living here in Warsaw. And the work that I do for a long time has largely been about me traveling and working in other places. And I'm thrilled with the gallery opening and that I'm actually able to do what I love and do it right here in Warsaw.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. That is awesome. Okay, so I want to step back. We're going to come back and talk about Atelier and some of the things you're doing, but want to rewind and go back because as I read your bio, you have just an unbelievable, just a lot of different things that you have done and been a part of, but take us to the beginning. Where were you originally from? What was childhood like for you?
Well, I moved around quite a bit as a child, initially, at a very young age. I was born in Boston, then Philadelphia, then Michigan, but then arrived in Lexington, Kentucky around first grade. So I grew up actually on a horse farm in Lexington, Kentucky. I was the oldest of 4 siblings. So we lived sort of out in the country. We didn't own the horse farm. My parents were academics, and they rented the old farmhouse on the property. So we kind of had the benefits of this beautiful setting. But, we were the 4 of us kids just kind of hanging out, using our imagination, running around the farm, reading books. And it was just a very sort of quiet, lovely childhood.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What a setting to grow a creative imagination and brain that I now know is in you.
Well, I was very envious of kids that lived in neighborhoods. I thought that was amazing, the idea that you could just play with a friend so easily. But in retrospect, that probably did have a huge impact on me. Yeah.
Did you have a sense early on, like leanings towards art and creativity. I know your college path didn't start there, so
Right. Well, that's a good question. I definitely read a lot. I was a big reader. I definitely dreamed a lot and had a lot of different ideas, always generating ideas and secret clubs with my siblings. And, we would come up with little nonprofits we thought we should start and have, adventures and that sort of thing. I didn't specifically know that I was going to go into a creative field. And I think my whole sort of education and career just kind of unfolded, in terms of what was interesting to me at that moment and not trying to think too far down the line, doing what I knew I wanted to do at that moment and sort of having trust and faith that it would kind of all come together at some point.
Sure.
Which I feel like most recently it truly has. But yeah, I mostly, like I said, a lot of imagination. I started to get into theater in high school and into photography as well. Okay. And I think that's when I really started to have interest in, visual things and composition and design. I always loved rearranging my bedroom and making things look a certain way. Even in theater, while I loved acting, I really was interested in the way that everything looked visually, the way the set looked, the way the balance of the people on stage and that sort of thing. So I think that's when I really started to kind of realize that I had this interest in, visual things and aesthetics. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay. So college, you double majored in biology and anthropology. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
Okay. So how did you arrive at that? What was that choice?
I really liked science. I liked learning about how the world worked. Obviously that's biology. And then anthropology, I liked learning about civilizations and about how humans, the history of humankind. And I really thought they were an interesting pair of studies to do together. I did my senior thesis. This is pretty exciting. It's actually maybe this was what led to me ending up in Indiana.
Okay.
My senior thesis was maize, the political and economic implications of crop genetic uniformity.
Oh my goodness.
I feel like you need to say that again for me to get it.
Even though I intended to live in a big city, perhaps that was the first inkling that I was going to end up in the cornfields of Indiana.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
I had this whole idea with that too about writing a novel that would turn into a movie. It would be called Hunger Strike, and Harrison Ford would star in it, and it would be about there being some sort of blight that wiped out the crops across the world because we've genetically engineered our crops to be so similar.
Yes.
And not so that they're similarly vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay.
And in fact, there's a whole espionage about part of it where there's these things called seed banks where they store original, native seeds because they need that genetic material in order to engineer new strands.
Right.
So there's this part where different countries were trying to steal each other's, seeds. And it doesn't sound that sexy, but actually it's actually something that's very much starting to come into the news now.
Yeah, right.
So it's kind of interesting.
Oh, that's so interesting. Okay. So then law school right after that?
Law school. So I was studying biology, in college, and I thought I would go into environmental law potentially.
Okay. Yeah.
Got to law school, really started being interested in intellectual property law, how people, create things and then protect their inventions and their ideas and their work product. So I sort of shifted gears from environmental law to intellectual property law. And then I went to New York City to work as a patent litigator.
Oh my God.
So with a biology background, I worked mostly for clients in biotech and pharmaceutical companies. And this is actually another interesting reason that it's a kind of interesting that I've landed here in a medical device community as well, but, even though it seems, people always think it's very disparate that I was an intellectual property attorney and now I'm an art advisor, but there are a lot of similarities, right? I'm just fascinated by people who create things, who make things, who innovate, who build, who take an idea and see it through to fruition.
Yes. Yeah. Awesome. Go ahead.
Well, New York's still a big part of your life, isn't it? Do you have a daughter that lives there?
Yes. So we lived in New York, my husband and I, and we had our first daughter in New York City. And she is now back in New York. She went to college there and graduated and is now working there. And then our second daughter is in college there as well. So
She was there too.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Okay. So while you were there practicing law, do you recall any of the patents that you can talk about that just like, oh my goodness, this was crazy? Like,
That's a good question.
This was like such a big idea or such a crazy idea that stands out to you.
That's a good question. I did work on a case for Genentech in the federal circuit, and it was recombinant DNA technology for a therapeutic drug. So that was just, it was very interesting technology, but probably one of the zaniest things I worked on was when I was actually a summer associate. So while I was in law school, but before I was hired full-time by the law firm, I had a partner ask me to attempt an initial draft of a patent based on some drawings for a self-cleaning portable toilet.
Oh.
So
Okay.
So, the portable toilets that are dropped in at concerts and stuff like this.
Yeah.
So this was supposed to be a self-cleaning one, and it had this self-contained
that would be-
system, and you have to detail all the aspects of the technology that make it work. Now, the trick was that I received the sketches, the drawings. The inventor was Japanese, and everything was in Japanese, and I was supposed to just sort of figure it out. That was tricky. That was a very tricky assignment.
No kidding.
Yes.
Okay. So cool. Okay. So then, like you said, you had your first daughter in New York, and that's kind of where it seems like the corner turned a little bit towards some of the art. That's where the pivot
turned. So at that time, my husband and I were both working as attorneys in New York City. So before we had our oldest daughter, we were easily working till 10 o'clock every night and many weekends.
Yeah.
And it just didn't seem like it was going to be sustainable. What was the point in having a child if we were both doing that? So I always intended to step back from that when we started a family. And that's what I did. And, it was a little bit scary to have worked for a while to, get to a certain point in one's professional career and then to sort of step back from that. So I really was trying to be deliberate about, what are things I'm passionate about that I can do while staying at home to sort of figure out my next step. I was trying to think of it as like a little bit of a sabbatical and like this is my chance to explore. And I'm in New York City, so there's lots of resources here for me to learn and figure things out.
Yes.
And so the first thing I did was that I remembered in high school I'd won an award for a photograph that I had taken. I entered it into a photography competition, and I said, you know what, I really liked that, and I didn't do any of that in college, and I didn't do it in law school. I'm going to start doing photography again. So I started taking some classes. I started looking at contemporary photographers. I started learning about the, art historical origins of, photography. And that's sort of where I sort of made my segue into the field of art. So initially it was me making art, but then in the process of making art, you're looking at artists and you're learning about,
being inspired by other people.
Exactly. The history of art. And then also what are people making right now? Like what are they doing and how are they doing it? And that's sort of where I started off. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, with that, how did that kind of take off into a career then?
Right. So I had a little toddler in a stroller, and I would, I was shooting film photography, and I would get on the subway, carry the stroller. Many of the subway stations in New York don't have elevators, or at least at the time they didn't. And so I would.
And you're carrying it with her in it.
Yeah, I'd pick up the 2-year-old in the McLaren and trot down the steps, and then go down to the photography district to a great photography printer down there. And I started, while I was down in the photography district, I started going to galleries more.
Okay.
I started going to see shows. I started going to museums more. Museums are easy to do with kids in tow, know. And I just started to get really just excited and invigorated and inspired every day by seeing new work and just seeing these things, these works that people were creating out of their mind and skill and will. Around that time, we started to make a couple initial art purchases for ourselves. And it kind of went rather quickly after that. We had a little apartment and we put up a couple pieces that I thought were fantastic. And there were a lot of reasons, why I and we can get into that later about, sort of how I make those assessments. But
Sure. Yeah.
I hung those works, and then people would come over to our apartment for, a dinner or, whatever, play dates, that sort of thing. And they'd say, how did you know, like, where did you find that? How did you know that the price that, they were asking was a good price? Like, how do you make these decisions? And I sort of explained my process, and people would be really interested in it. And then they started asking me to help them find artwork.
Okay.
And so it kind of grew very quickly from there, because then, the new person that I'm helping buy art, they hang the art in their house, and then people come to their house and say, how did you do it?
So it's very organic. It was like a hobby for a long time.
And I have found that most things that have gone extremely well in my life have like that sort of organic quality and that momentum, and it just kind of flows.
Yes.
Like, I love that when something just starts
You're
to
not
flow.
fighting the current. It was like
Exactly.
You just kind of going.
Yeah. So it was really nice. And then that was my old colleagues at my law firm were some of my initial clients too. And that was a great, that was a great thing.
Perfect. Yeah.
They understood my professionalism. They also sort of just from knowing me knew that, my aesthetic tastes and judgments. So they hired me to start helping them. That was sort of my initial client base. And so initially, a lot of my clients were in New York City and on the East Coast. And then when I started getting clients in other parts of the country, once a client somewhere else installed, 1 or 2 or 3 pieces in their home, I would offer to go out and do a cocktail party for their friends. So I would ask a client, invite, 12 couples to your house. I'll, have food and drinks, and I'll do a quick, PowerPoint presentation on how to begin collecting contemporary art, what to look for, how to interpret the artist's CV, their resume, and look for things that might give you a clue as to, how is this work decorative or is it potentially investment grade? What's the difference there?
Wow.
And then, I would do one of those parties, a 15, 20-minute talk. People would have lots of questions after, very informal, really fun. And then I would get clients from those events.
Okay.
So a lot of my client base is like these little clusters all over the country. Again, because it's sort of organic growth. So I have a lot of clients on the East Coast, a lot of clients on the West Coast. I have a lot of clients in Texas. Dallas and Austin are really great markets for what I do. And that's sort of how it developed. And during that time, geographically, we moved. We had as I mentioned, our first daughter in New York. And this is actually kind of funny. We knew we wanted to have a larger family.
Okay.
And, it's tricky in New York.
Sure.
Space.
Right.
So we were spending lots of weekends looking at Brooklyn, looking at the suburbs. And I kept saying, I'm just not a suburb person. I have to be right downtown. I'm a big city girl. So we actually, it's funny now, right?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So we actually moved from New York City to Chicago for that very reason, because I couldn't do the suburbs.
Oh my goodness.
I couldn't do
so funny.
and then we had 3 more kids in Chicago, and I continued doing this advisory work.
Yes.
And
How many years were you in Chicago then?
so we were in Chicago, I think about 9 years.
Okay.
Wow.
So,
okay.
and, so with the advisory work, it's just a lot of, it's like matchmaking. There's a chemistry to it.
Yes.
It's meeting the client, getting to know them. What are they looking for? Sometimes they'll come to me and they'll say, here are 3 famous artists I love, whose work's in the millions. This is not not where the level of spending they're able to do. And so it's my job to say, who's like an up and coming artist whose prices are going to be, in the range of this client, and not who's copying this master, right? Or the higher selling artist, but who's might resonate in a similar way for whatever reason.
Okay.
And that's really fun for me. And so not only is it matchmaking between the the artwork and the artist and the client, it also is often sort of like matchmaking between the couple too. If I'm working with a couple, because sometimes in the couple there'll be very different aesthetic preferences.
Yeah, sure.
So that's actually really fun for me too, is to try to find something that both people, if it's a couple that's collecting, resonates with both of them.
Well, I think that kind of goes back to even your college of the human
anthropology,
studying of people.
Yeah.
It's like you're still kind of doing some of that, just now in a different way.
Right.
That's
and that's
pretty
why
cool.
that's why I tell my children too, especially my older girls who are really trying to plot out things. Like I admire that and some of that is very necessary, but I also want them to take a little pressure off themselves because you never know the synergies that are going to happen and you're always if you're learning
pressure off too,
if you're learning and trying to add some value to the world, you're on the right track.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. Okay. I'm not going to do justice to your full, presentation or thoughts, but what would you say? I mean, for people who are interested in collecting art or starting to
like
do
that
that.
PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. What would you say? I mean, like right off the bat, what are the things you would encourage people to be thinking about and looking for?
Well, so for me, I've noticed that there are three things, I usually see a piece and I just love it. Or I don't like. It speaks to me in some way. So there's that emotional response. But what I've found in the pieces that I'm drawn to are sort of three common characteristics. So one is just that they're beautiful, and beautiful is such a broad definition, and it's different to every viewer, obviously as well. But it can be traditionally beautiful. It can be a more sensual beauty. It could be even something a little edgy or ugly beautiful. Even there is something to that as well. So something that just speaks to you aesthetically, visually. The second thing is some sort of artistic virtuosity. So I want to see that the artist has a high level of skill in some way. Like I really want to see that they've honed some sort of, they've studied, they're working at their craft. There's a high level of artistic acumen there. And then I love some sort of intellectual underpinning. To me, that's part of the story is, some sort of, either art historical influence or historical influence or cultural tie or, it can be the artist could be inspired by a novel, a personal experience. But I just really like to know, I want to see some intellectual rigor, some sort of thought process.
Yeah, like the art's the result of this.
Yes. So those are the things that I look for. And then, there are lots of, I always tell people that the easiest way to get started, a lot of people are intimidated about going into art galleries. Hopefully not Atelier. I really don't think, I really want it to be available to everyone, and that's important to me. But in New York City, for example, there are a lot of, sort of off-putting, aloof gallery experiences to be had. And I do want people when they're traveling to feel comfortable going into a gallery and looking at art. And so one of the things that I tell people is a great sort of crutch to use, but it's also very informative, is to ask to see if you like some work that you see. Often galleries won't have the prices on the labels, and you're kind of curious and you want to ask more questions, but you're not sure how to start that conversation. You can always ask to see the artist's CV, their curriculum vitae. So all artists should have a CV.
Okay.
And you can ask to see the CV, and then you get, a little biography, like sort of what we're doing today. You get the educational information. You get information about, the age of the artist, the, where they went to school, if they went to school. And then you get a rundown of solo exhibitions that they've done and group exhibitions that they've done.
Like a resume, but
it's just completely a resume.
Okay.
Yeah, they call it a CV in the art world, and in academia as well. But or you could even you could certainly ask for the artist's resume as well. Same thing. But it's a nice rundown in publications they may have been in. And so that starts to give you some information to start a discussion. I mean, it's just interesting probably for you personally, but if you want to have a discussion with a gallery owner or with someone else, in the gallery, gives you some background information. And then there are little, clues you can look for on the resume too, to sort of see, is this, is it a brand new artist? Is it an artist that has been working for a long time and has done tons of shows? The price of an artist, for example, that has works in public collections, like, if it says has work in the Whitney or the MoMA, that's going to be a different level than someone who's 25, just got their MFA. But these are all sort of things that can clue you into, the trajectory of the artist and kind of give you some idea of what the value should be and, some little hints.
Excellent. I love it. I love it. Okay. So New York attorneys turned art advisor, dealer, moved to Chicago. You're getting closer to Warsaw. How did you?
But still didn't know Warsaw existed at that point. Yeah. So I had just had our fourth child, and in that it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks after we'd had our youngest.
Okay.
My husband says, and I'm in a haze.
Oh, yes, you just have a newborn.
Exactly. My husband says something about, I have this opportunity to, in this town in Indiana. And he might have even said of like approximately 15,000 people. And I think it'd be it's really interesting to me. And I think it's a great opportunity. And I'm like, what? Where? Huh? Like, I just was so beyond.
Step behind the suburb.
I had no. So basically, my husband is a mergers and acquisitions attorney.
Okay.
And so he was doing he was a partner at a firm in Chicago and was doing outside counsel work for Dane Miller and for Biomet.
Okay.
So this was at the time when Biomet was planning to do an IPO.
Okay.
And so the idea was for us to move down here for a couple of years. John would help run the IPO, and then we'd either move back to Chicago, back to New York. Or,
Okay.
That was the plan.
Yes.
And
That's how he got you to.
What?
That's how you kind of made the decision.
So
that actually
Convinced
did
you.
it.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that helped was that the first time I came down here to look at the town was that we went to Cerulean at the end of the evening. I had said newborn with me. It had been a long day of like traveling and like looking at schools and looking at houses, and I wasn't quite sure how I was feeling about things. And we were sitting on the porch at Cerulean, and the baby was getting fussy, and there were these two couples, a little bit older than us, at the table next to us, and the two women came over and like, we'll just take the baby so you guys can have a nice dinner.
No way.
Yes. And I was like,
and you're from a big city.
Yeah, I was like, what's happening? We'll just take the baby. Like, we love babies. We'll just bounce the baby over here. And it turned, you guys would be familiar with who these people were. One of the women ended up telling me that she was a kindergarten teacher, and at the school that we had just looked at that day.
Yeah.
Okay.
My son was going to be an incoming kindergartner.
Yeah.
And she and her husband coached the a chess club and a chess team at that elementary school. And my son was a chess fanatic.
Wow.
He had already at age 4 won
At age
tournaments
4.
in Chicago and stuff.
my
So
goodness.
so I was like, okay,
Amazing.
I'm
Yeah.
like, here I'm on the porch,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
these nice people. I'm like, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can do
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Oh,
That's the beauty
cool.
of the small town.
Yeah.
Is you sensed it too.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so you settled here,
Yeah.
and I think, as I understand it, you were starting to look for office space to kind of continue your art.
Right. Well, initially, yeah. So initially, like I said, I think we thought we weren't going to be here quite that long.
Okay.
And then the IPO for Biomet turned into the merger with Zimmer.
Sure.
So we kind of wrapped up even quicker than we had thought. And at that point, we were like, okay, what's our next move? And well, our 4 kids loved it.
Yeah.
We were like, how do we pack? We'd kind of exploded. You have more space. Our kids didn't have to schedule appointments with us to walk to the park, right? They just
and they had
ran
a
out
yard.
the door. Yeah. It's very different than living in an
Yes.
apartment in
Yeah.
a city. And we loved the schools. I think the schools here are like unbelievable. And if more people knew about our public school system,
Yes.
Oh my goodness, yes.
that would double,
100%.
triple the population easily.
Yes.
We loved the schools. We loved the lakes. We loved the wagon wheel. That was something early on where I was like, this is really interesting to me because this is high caliber theater.
I've wondered because you're on the board of the
I am
Wagon
now,
Wheel,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So even just hearing you're being interested in theater, earlier in your life, I'm like, because I've always wondered how you got plugged in at the Wagon Wheel, but now that makes sense knowing more of your
and
story.
my second daughter, the one who's in college in New York, did a lot of the shows. So I wasn't allowed to volunteer or be on the board
because she was there.
Well, because she didn't
From
want.
her. Yeah.
She didn't
Mom.
want.
Yeah,
She didn't
get
want,
out of
well,
here,
number
Mom.
one, she
Yeah.
probably didn't want me. In her space.
Yeah.
But also, she didn't want there to be like an idea that somehow she was getting her roles. From it.
Yeah.
Not that Wagon Wheel would ever do that, but
Yes.
that,
I know.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I was just stunned by the quality of performances that they put on, and I said, if a theater of this caliber can exist in a town of this size, there's something special going on here.
Yes.
That, I said, and I was curious to figure more of that out. Because at that point, a couple of years in, it takes it takes a while to get to know people, like kind of learn the area and, all that. But that was definitely one of the reasons that we ended up staying. And we were like, let's do this.
That part of your story.
So my intention was to just kind of keep doing the advisory work out of the house, raise the family.
Yeah.
I would travel to New York a couple times a year just to stay abreast of what was going on. I try to go to, I go to art fairs throughout the year. I try to go to New York for the Armory Show, Chicago for Expo Chicago every year. I go to Miami for Art Basel every year just to see, the art fairs are great because, you have hundreds of galleries showing exhibits and you just walk in and you're just seeing everything that's happening.
Yes.
It's very exciting.
Yes.
And each year I try to go to one international show and I try to change that around so that I'm finding new artists and new places.
And connecting to people who speak like you, that understands, appreciates the art and everything. Because I'm sure that might have felt a little lonely in Warsaw, maybe.
Well,
connecting to people on that level.
Well, I will say that when I moved here, the kids pop right into school.
Yes.
My husband had a built-in a job and a network, and it took me a little while because once it takes a while.
How do you meet people
meet people and figure all of that out? But actually, art was one of the things that helped me figure it out because I was able to stay connected with like the outside world.
Yeah.
I felt like I think I was worried about it being too insular here.
Yes.
But if you're always
connecting
even from your home, like reading, every day I get a couple hundred emails from galleries about what their current shows are. I get press releases. I'm through social media, obviously, you see all sorts of interesting projects going on everywhere. So that was one of the things that really, actually, I probably delved even deeper into my work during that time as a way to sort of stay connected to what's going on in other places. So I was very much doing a country mouse, city mouse thing. I was, I was, doing, had this, very lovely, personal life and lifestyle, and then I would jet off and do the work that I found really interesting. So yes, initially I was just planning to sort of amp up the professionalism with office space, get out of the house, and really take the work to the next level. Especially as my kids were older, I just had more spare, more time. And when you're in sales, the more time you can be selling, the better.
Yes.
And I wanted it to be an interesting space architecturally. Spaces that available. There were spaces available in strip malls and that sort of thing. But I was like, I really want something interesting. And the building at downtown on Center Street became available. And, it's a historic building. It's all white, which is, great for showing art. Great, we did the facade in art glass windows. And I was like, I was like, this could be a great office, but it absolutely just needs to be exhibition space as well.
Yeah.
And here again, it just happened so rapidly. I was like, I have this advisory business. I think I'm going to do a gallery too. People can see artwork here in Warsaw. I said it will give people something else to do downtown because people come here, they drive down, they park, they go to dinner, and then they leave because they don't have two things,
Yes.
Obviously, they're shopping, but I'm talking about like an evening out,
right.
To have more than one thing to do.
Stroll the sidewalk.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I said, I'm just going to try it. It seemed a little crazy, but it also seemed right. I don't know. It just
like in that organic flow.
Yeah, exactly. In that flow, and it seemed really interesting. Like it seemed like it was going to be challenging, but it seemed like a really good challenging. And I just love that feeling of wanting to do something, wanting to pursue a certain vision, and maybe it not being easily understandable by everybody immediately. Like everybody, is that really going to work? Because I like a little bit of pushback.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's rare about you.
It fuels me a little.
So
it fuels
cool.
me a little bit, And that's something I've always liked in my life is, just juxtaposition something a little bit off, the sort of
It's the artist creative in you.
I guess. I just think it's fun. You know, I think it's fun to make something work that might not be what everybody sort of expects to work.
Yeah.
So
cool. So cool. Okay, so you open Atelier.
Yes.
Your openings, typically have hundreds of people that show up. We know people come from South Bend and Fort Wayne. So congratulations
Thank you.
the success of that. As it's been rolling and as you've had different shows, I mean, how do you see the community just coming around it now and embracing it? Because again, here's how I see it from my perspective. You have brought in the outside world to our downtown and to our community in such a big way.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's been really interesting to me, like how it moves in both directions, and I love that. The sort of community interest in it has exceeded my expectations. I can tell you that, and there is a real hunger, probably everywhere, but also in this community for intellectual discourse, for community engagement, for coming together to talk about something or learn about something or see something that you haven't seen before. And I just really love being there every day, meeting all kinds of different people, having all kinds of different conversations. But back to the point of it flowing both ways, it's been really interesting to me to see how much the community has been interested in it. And then also my collectors that I already brought with me to Warsaw that live on other coasts are so fascinated by what's going on here.
Really?
Not only at Atelier, but like, what is this community that shows up, 100 people for an opening, that, is, the art that I sell, often I'll have shows where half of it goes to other parts of the country and half of it stays in northern Indiana, here in Warsaw, South Bend, Fort Wayne. It varies from show to show. It's kind of fun to see what shows resonate with, people in different geographies. But yeah, it's flowing both ways. And, the other thing that's interesting about it is that, if I were to be doing this in New York City, for example, I wouldn't be able to show some of the artists that I do show just because my overhead costs would be at such a high level that in order for me to keep sustaining, I would have to have artists with a more proven track record in order to get the prices that support the artist and support the gallery.
Yeah.
Here I'm able to show newer artists,
Like the high school students.
Yes,
I
like
just love that. So please talk about that. That's so cool. You're inspiring artists of all ages and levels.
Well, that was really fun. I mean, I try to vary the programming. I mean, it's all stuff that all the shows are things that I'm excited about. And one of the things I really love about having a gallery is that I get to change it completely every 2 months. It can be a completely different environment. Sometimes it's more, refined and elegant. Sometimes it's irreverent, so it's playful. And I mean, that's why art is such an exciting area to work in, is that there's just, it runs the gamut. I mean, it's reflecting humanity and the human condition, and it runs the gamut, just like we all do, as, individuals and communities.
Yeah.
So each year I typically do between 4 and 5 solo exhibitions. So obviously a solo exhibition is just the artist, the work of one artist. And then I try to do one group exhibition. So the first year the group, and that's always organized around a theme. So you get different artists, you tell them what the theme is, and you invite them to participate in the show. The first year I did, a show called Pink is Punk. And I knew ahead of, I knew sort of when I opened the gallery, I knew the Barbie movie was going to be coming out, Greta Gerwig's Barbie movie, and I knew it was going to be obviously a big, as we all did, a big sensation. And I thought, if Barbie is this affluent professional woman with this amazing dream house, like what would her art collection look like? And so that was sort of the idea for the show. And that was a very fun show. And so this year we did a show called Next Wave, Surf the Saw, as in surfing in Warsaw.
Yes.
Surf the Saw was supposed to have a lot of different meanings. Not only
you had hats made.
We had hats. We did surf hats. Yeah, we kind of went all in. That was our immersive surf shack experience. And so that was a show of student work from the high school. We worked on that show for about a year. So we we actually had those students come into the Barbie show, to Pink is Punk, to sort of to experience what a group show was like.
Cool.
And sort of like what that more immersive experience is like. And said, we're going to do a show that of student work, and I wanted it to. I mean, obviously, a surf shack is just fun for a summer show.
Yes,
in and of itself. But I also wanted the show to highlight what is another thing that's so special about this community.
Yes.
Again, I have people that follow on social media, and I have collectors in other places, and I have galleries in other places that are sort of kind of interested in what I'm doing. Yeah. And so I'm like, do you know about our lakes? This is another thing that's so fantastic about where we live, and people just don't even think about it, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, this is a great way to highlight that. And then the high school also has this amazing boarding program. So I just love when these shows come together, and there's so many different things you can highlight and do with them.
Yes.
And so the students came in a year ahead of time, and then during the course of their academic year, they were able to work on the products and
literally creating boards, their art,
creating surfboards, wakeboards, stand-up paddle boards, and then even some ceramic pieces. There was a video piece in the show, a surf video in the piece that was amazing. We just projected it on the back wall. It was such a cool vibe.
Yeah.
There was some performance art involved, some photography, painting. So it was a great show, and it was really fun to work with the kids. And that's something I'm hoping to repeat maybe every 2 years. Not the Surf Shack, but we'll do a different theme. But I'd like to work with be able to touch students. Every couple years, I'm thinking is sort of the best way to approach that.
Just love it.
Yeah.
No, that was such an amazing thing. And, one of the stories I know is Allie Barkey. So she's a senior in high school with our son. And, I believe she had the stand-up paddle board, that was kind of a big part of the exhibit. And
which sold, by the way.
Which is incredible.
So the other part of the show was, and that was part of, the students took 100% of their profits from the show. I wanted them to also see, it's obviously about like taking an idea, making it happen. And there's a lot of that goes into the engineering and, aesthetics of these products they were completing at the high school under the tutelage of Andrea Miller at the high school. But then also to see the installation process at the gallery, like how you install the show and to interact with people at an opening and talk to people about your work.
Yeah.
And for a young artist too, that you should be paid for your work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like what you did for their confidence.
Oh, yeah.
I think is huge.
Well, and I bring up Allie just because, we've seen her growing up for years, and she's worked with her grandfather at some of the art shows down at the Village.
We have some of her pieces
and we've
in
bought
our
some of her
home.
pieces. And just to see her, the evolution and growth for her, to then be able to step into your gallery, have a really featured piece. And her dad just showed me the picture the other day of it now hanging on someone's wall.
The person who bought it installed it and sent a picture back to the gallery so that I could share it with the artist, which is very cool. I think it's important for a lot of reasons, but I think sometimes all of us as humans, we tend to discount the talents that come naturally to us a little bit.
Yeah.
We sometimes underestimate our own skill because it kind of comes out of us in a more natural way. We think it's maybe not valuable or it's easy for everyone, and that's just not the case. And so I do really like encouraging people to see that value.
Yes.
Well, I think you have that gift too, C, of like seeing it in people and pulling them in. Like even when you're talking about your themed galleries, like I'm thinking back that the surf one, you had a snow truck or snow cone truck out front. Everyone came in costumes. Like you're making it an event and inviting other people to bring what they offer in the community to it. And I think that's like so cool. And I don't know, is it rare like to have to look for opportunities to help people shine?
Well, thank you. When I named the gallery Atelier because it's the French word for an artist's workshop, with the idea that it not only would it be, my office space and an exhibition space, but I was like, sometimes I wanted to create a physical space that would just bring people in to sort of share their talents or thoughts or ideas. Like I wanted it to be almost a think tank.
Yeah.
For the community. So it's been really exciting to see that, you know, start to unfold. And, you know, people will come in. There are amazingly talented people in this community.
Yes.
And that's the best part of having a physical door that people can walk into is that they do come in, and people that I wouldn't have met otherwise come in and share amazing skills sets and ideas and work product with me. And so you know, that's the best part of having the physical space, honestly, is connecting with those people. And, you know, when I do these shows, I mean, I'm doing things I'm interested in and that I think are really cool and beautiful, but I'm doing the same thing I'm presenting the same work I would if I lived anywhere else. Like I'm not sort of adjusting it. It's just, you know, what I think is I think is high level and excellent, and just trying to share it. And that's what I've seen too. But people that I've collaborated with is that there's so many people doing high level videography, photography, catering. Right here. And it's amazing, and it's exciting.
You've given them a place to connect and collect. Like you even have done some fundraisers in, you know, you're showcasing, giving people a place to come to share about their nonprofits and it's really
well, one of the
amazing.
things I was excited about having the two of you here is, you know, the love and passion for creativity and art. And I see like just the wide range of spectrum of, you know, you coming from elementary education and art teaching all the way to you fine art dealer. I'd love to hear from both of you just the importance of creativity inside of a community, the importance of art that has in community. Because again, I think people can come in and say, where does art have a place in a small Midwestern town, right? But it does, and it's so powerful. So I'd love to just maybe hear your perspectives on that.
Do you want to go first? Or do you want me to?
I mean, art moves people. You said that emotion is one of the key things that you look for when you're studying and learning about a piece and finding artists to work with. I think that's huge. And so often as humans, we might not be able to put words to how we feel or we think, but by starting to create, by painting or coloring or looking at a piece, all of a sudden it helps us process things we're going through, things we feel. So whether you're with a 4-year-old who's scribbling black paint all over a paper, or, you know, in a museum and gallery studying work, I think it pulls different things out of us that helps us process and connect to others. What would you say?
I 100% agree with you. I have had, you know, we obviously have the openings, which are, you know, well attended, and back to the thematic aspect of it, people have really taken to sort of dressing.
Yes, I love that. I'm going to come
dressing
to one of those.
Inspired by the artwork.
You've given them permission to be playful in their clothes.
Which I love. I love that people kind of really like take it to the next level. And so really the success, I mean, you know, the gallery is really, I think of it as sort of Warsaw's, you know, I mean, because that the visitors and the viewers bring such energy and their own stories, and they share them with each other, and they share them with the artist, and the artist gets to see how their work,
what a reward thing there
moves people. But to your point, there are also those just regular quiet days, you know, where, you know, people trickle in and out, looking at the work. And, you know, I've had people, you know, I've had people get emotional in front of works, and then perhaps decide to tell me, you know, what's going on in their life. You know, somebody might, I've had somebody looking at a work and said it really spoke to them. They were, you know, going through a divorce, and this sort of piece that they were looking at sort of was a sort of symbol for them of like their next chapter and where they were going. You know, I've had people come in and tell me about, you know, losing a spouse of 50 years and getting emotional in the gallery. I've had Cub Scouts come in on a Saturday morning and earn their art appreciation badge. I had a candy show up by a Puerto Rican artist at the holidays last year, and he's sort of a pop artist, expressionist pop I call it, and the kids had read about Andy Warhol before they came into the gallery, so they were telling me everything they learned about pop art, and then looking at the work, and then the parents said, thank you to earn this badge. We had to go to a gallery or a museum. And it was great to be able to
to
drive 5 minutes instead of over to Fort Wayne or South Bend. Although you should still attend your local museums. So I just love the different ways people. I have high school students who will come in and do pictures before dances in the gallery because they want a different background and sort of a different space.
Yeah.
So I love the way that the community uses it. I love the fact that I have all ages.
Yes.
Coming in. I think that's really exciting. At the openings, I had actually somebody from an orthopedics executive at one of the openings who pulled me aside and said, I've been coming to events in Warsaw for, 15 years, and I've never seen such diversity in ages and backgrounds as I see at this event. And that was a huge compliment because, I love that there's so much we can learn from each other, and it's important to not get, stuck in our little subsets and groups.
Yes.
And I love it when people bring in their children. I love it when women come for a girls' night out. We open a bottle of champagne, there's lots of ways to use the space. And the best part, I keep saying this is the best part. So I guess there are a lot of best parts.
You were meant to do this, see?
One of the greatest parts is that the business model supports hundreds of people seeing the work and using the space, even if they aren't purchasing themselves. There's no admission fee, all the openings, and the gallery is open to the public. And so that's another great thing. I love how that works. I love that that's been able to work, that people can come in and just enjoy the art and learn from it. And, learn about themselves. Yes. I think looking at art, it's obviously art is about storytelling. Yes. So very much like what you guys do here at Dream On. And it's about empathy. It's about developing empathy for other people because you're learning their perspectives, their stories.
Right.
And I think it's a lot about having more empathy for yourself.
Yeah. It's so good.
It's, you're seeing commonalities. You're seeing other, the visual might be new, but the reason there's a reason it resonates. And you maybe not even be able to identify specifically what that is, but there's something that speaks to you. And I think you can learn a lot of empathy and grace for your neighbors and for yourself by just considering and listening. And we think of art as very visual. It is, but it's kind of a lot about listening. Yeah. Taking in.
Yes.
Considering.
Yes. Well, and I love how you said earlier too of lean into what speaks to you, right? And I think sometimes with art, there can just be this feeling of it's not for me, and it may be that there's some of it's not for you, and there's certain lanes, but there's things that will speak to you. And again, I just want to stress this to, some of our Midwest friends that are just maybe feel like I can't walk into it. It is free, and you love people coming. And the expectation is not come in and buy everything, right?
No, absolutely. Or and there are plenty of people that are huge, fans of the gallery who haven't purchased yet, and maybe they will one day, and maybe they won't, and that's fine. And I want everybody to enjoy it and experience it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You brought a book.
I did. Well, this is another way that people can experience it.
Okay.
So I decided after the end of the first year, I was like, there have been so many fun events here, so much beautiful art. So many, we also have book clubs and poetry readings. Oh, yes. We didn't even really get into the mental health benefits of art yet, but that's another huge one. So lots of great events going on in the gallery. And I was like, I kind of want to capture it. I kind of want to do like a high school yearbook. Especially as I mentioned that people, start dressing up and wearing these art-inspired outfits. And because the community is such a integral part of what makes it alive and interesting and breathes the life into the walls. So I brought you guys
That's so
book.
cool.
So this is the second one. So I have they're the same size each year. So people that want to follow along, it has all of the shows in it. I ask somebody who lives locally to write the sort of last sort of written essay in the book each year with some sort of story about Warsaw.
Okay.
I really do like to connect it to this place because it is very, the work might be from elsewhere. Sometimes it's from here, sometimes it's from somewhere else. But I like to connect it to where we are for a lot of different reasons. But because that is, obviously what art is about is taking your own, finding your own connections with it and making it, part of who you are. So.
Yes. No, I love it because you've got write-ups about the artist. You've got things about their different works. This is very cool. What a cool idea.
And lots of pictures of the community using the space. So, I love it as just like a little, capsule of what's happening each year.
Yeah.
And then also it's a nice way for people that might not be in the position to buy a piece quite yet, but they want to have something, so they want to, there's art that they love that they want to keep on their coffee table. So that's another reason we do it.
So cool. Well, thank you. This is awesome.
So enjoy.
That is so good. Okay.
And then hopefully in, 8 years, you'll have a nice set of 10.
Yes,
yeah, it'll look
love
really
it.
nice on your bookshelf.
Yes. So good. So good. Well, you mentioned, I want to touch on it before we close out, the mental health benefits. Again, we're living in a time right now. It is stressful and there's a lot going on. And I think mental health has kind of been brought a little bit in the spotlight through COVID, pandemic, and politics and all the pieces of now. It's kind of like, okay, we're paying a little bit more attention to this. How does art interact with that?
So there are the therapeutic benefits, obviously, of creating art, but then just even looking at art and developing, compassion for yourself, seeing that, I know what I was going to say. So people will say to me sometimes when they find out that I own an art gallery or that I work in the art world, and they say it here, they say it in New York, they say it, people say this in a lot of different places, but they'll say, I know nothing about art.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I'm not an artist.
What?
I'm not an artist. I don't know anything about art.
Exactly. I'm sure you've heard that. And I say, well, have you ever been in love? Have you ever had your heart broken?
So good.
Have you, struggled with your concept of God and a divine being? Have you thought about your mortality, your purpose in life? Have you been beaten down by a failure? Then you know what you need to know. I mean, and so when you were saying about people should feel comfortable coming in, I really think that's true. These are, artists are sharing their personal perspective on universal themes. So that ties in with mental health as well, obviously, because we need to remember that we're not alone. We need to remember that people before us, people, that go, our ancestors and then our descendants and the people around us are all having different experiences. And sometimes they're having tremendous joys and sometimes they're having tremendous struggles. And we need to have grace with each other and with ourselves. And I think art is part of that. It's reminding us, of these similarities in the human condition.
You mentioned empathy earlier. And I think that's a huge part too. It's when you're looking at a piece of art or you're thinking about creating a piece of art, you have to kind of slow down. And I think our way of life now, we can just be going, and we pick up our phone if we're in a line and it's not moving fast enough, So it's like when you're studying a piece of art or you're trying to create, you're slowing down and the world slows down and you're kind of able to process through your thoughts and your feelings further than you might just like driving to the next thing.
Absolutely.
Which I really allows, I think, the mental health to get to a more balanced center place if you kind of can get through the cycle of a complete thought or feeling.
Right.
To figure out root and cause. And
absolutely,
So good.
And I think that's actually what intrigues me about the future of Warsaw as well, is that we have this, biotech, life sciences, medical device community here, which is obviously sort of tasked with the idea of, protecting and preserving and advancing the human body.
Yes.
And I like the idea of this sort of running in tandem, this arts economy. That could develop if we play our cards right, Erica.
And we're working on it.
And we work hard. And in conjunction with organizations like the Wagon Wheel, for example, where, we're charged with, preserving and protecting and advancing the integrity of the human soul. I think that duality could be really interesting. And there's lots of interesting commonalities. I mean, engineers are creating taking ideas and making a product too. Absolutely. And so I think there's an interesting future ahead.
Oh, I love that.
See, you've had your art gallery for 2 years.
Yes.
And you've done so much. I'm just curious, is there anything you haven't done yet? Or do you even know, like within this space?
There's both.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm working on the 2026 calendar right now. 2025 is pretty much set. I'm really interested in doing a lecture series because people do really enjoy the book club and the poetry reading. So I'm interested in doing a lecture series, potentially a lecture series / podcast. I'll have to get back with you about that. We'll see. We'll see. Right. And my working title for the lecture series / potential podcast is called TAD Talks. So not TED Talks, and I have to, obviously I'll do the intellectual property background work on that. Yeah. But TED Talks, referring to the namesake of our county, Tadeusz Kosciuszko.
Ah, yes.
And before he started his military career, he was a Revolutionary War general. And before he started his military career, he attended painting school in Paris. So he has this interest, and then he went on to be a military engineer. So you have someone who is an engineer and an artist who is also our county
namesake of our county.
The namesake of our county. Wow. So I think it could be very interesting to do to sort of do a deeper dive there. And I think sort of exploring why we're named for this person and who this person is an interesting way to approach sort of the development of our town as well, because I think sometimes when you talk about progress or advancing the ball, people think that means just new.
Yeah.
And it can mean new and newer things, but it can also mean like investigating more deeply the past, bringing things that are special that are already here to the light.
You use your college education every day, girl. What you studied, you're speaking here.
I guess that's true.
It's
okay,
so cool.
Thank you.
I didn't know all that about.
Yeah. So I think I just think there's a ton of potential.
That's so neat.
That's exciting.
So, and then I would love to see artist residencies. I would love to do a residency where I have an artist come and live in the community for 3 months and create work that stays in the community.
Cool.
I think that would be very cool. There's no end to the ideas. I'm afraid to tell you.
I love it. No, well, please keep dreaming and keep doing the things you're doing. And yeah, you both serve on the Main Street Warsaw board, and our community is having a really special moment right now.
Completely.
I mean, it is across the county. Downtown is really just reshaping in such an amazing way. So it's an exciting time to be here. As we wrap this up, tell us about your next show, what you've got coming up, and how people can connect with you.
I am very excited about this next show. So the next show opens on Friday, March 21st. It is figurative paintings by an artist, a 26-year-old artist from New York City.
How cool.
He is amazing. We did his first solo exhibition in 2023, in spring of 2023.
Okay.
His very first solo exhibition. I'd been following him on social media for a while, and I had actually bought a couple of his paintings years ago before he even went to graduate school. And when he told me the price on the paintings, I was like, well, I will give you this amount, but you are not charging enough for your level of talent. Like, I feel guilty. So anyway, I circled back with him after he graduated. His name is John McGregor. The show that we have coming up is called Dust Bunny Angels, New Paintings by John McGregor. Okay. When we had his first solo exhibition in the spring of 2023, the show sold out. It was my second show. I couldn't believe that's very unusual to sell a show out completely. A lot of the work did stay local. Some of it went to New York, some went to California, some went to Texas. But the show sold out. He then went, he came for the opening, went back to New York, then got group shows in New York City, in London.
So cool.
I love his work. I said, I wonder if he'll still come back now that he's really moving along. And I should say, too, not only did the show sell out, but the Fort Wayne Museum of Art acquired one of his paintings for their permanent collection. So it was a huge success.
That's cool.
He then went on to have these shows in major cities, both nationally and internationally. And I said, John, would you consider coming back in 2025? And he said, of course I will. He's like, that show changed my life. And so that is Warsaw showing up, supporting, and changing a young person's life and validating his work and his, and propelling him forward. So he's excited to come back. I'm excited for him to show again. His work's figurative. It's very sort of nostalgic about childhood. They're beautiful paintings. There's always a touch of like a little bit something ominous or sinister in them, which I think really delves into, our memories of childhood, where we're first sort of learning about there's a lot of beauty and comfort and safety, but then we're also sort of navigating and learning about some of the darker aspects, of life. And I think, John, the painter, was the youngest child of a pastor who moved around a lot in his childhood. So there are always religious themes in his work. And I think he is very interested in that idea of, there has to be a little bit of darkness for you to understand the beauty of the light. And and these things kind of go hand in hand. And I think it's going to be a beautiful show. Awesome. And it's the perfect show to start spring with too. So
I love it. Okay, so March 21st, Friday.
Yep.
Make sure to make it out to that. Come over to Atelier.
Yeah.
6
to 8:30 p.m.
6 to 8:30.
Sorry. Yes,
No,
everyone is welcome, please.
Okay, awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for being with us today. It's been so much fun, and just really appreciate you and the work that you're doing and the way that you're impacting our community. So, no, we're all in it together.
Yes,
right?
absolutely. And it's exciting.
It's exciting that we get to come together and make this a great place for generations to come. So, thank you so much. And hey, Erica, great job.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You did a good job, which means you probably have to come back sometime.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
so awesome. Well, ladies, thank you so much. And to all of our listeners and viewers, thank you so much for joining us on Stories That Move. See you next time. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Stories That Move, brought to you by Dream On Studios.
Make sure to subscribe so that you don't miss the next episode. And remember, if you or your organization have a story you're eager to share with the world, Dream On Studios is here to bring that story to life.
Don't hesitate to reach out. You can find us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, or visit our website at dreamonstudios.io. We understand how overwhelming it can be trying to bring your vision and story to life, but that's why we exist, and we've walked alongside hundreds of clients doing that very thing.
Yeah. We believe every story has the potential to inspire, to move, and to make a difference. Let's make yours heard.
Until next time, keep moving forward and keep telling those stories that matter.
Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time on Stories That Move.